Well, I want to start with a question. What is one thing that nonprofits are doing that is actually pushing donors away? Well, today we're going to talk about that and several other important topics. And my name is Dr. Randy Dirks, and this is Funding the Future Now podcast. It's designed for fundraising professionals, whether they be the president, CEO, or an executive role within the nonprofit. And really, it's designed to give practical, tangible advice and guidance for us in the nonprofit world. Well, today with me, just such a delight to have Derric Bakker. And Derric brings 3 decades and plus in the nonprofit sector. He's the founder, CEO of Dickerson Bakker. He's a best-selling author, and kudos to him. His book is on Amazon and is the best-selling book for nonprofit strategies, and it hasn't even gone, is more pre-order, if I understand that correctly, Derric. And so thought leader, keynote speaker, but just over these years, I love what you do, Derric, because you're helping people who are passionate about very wonderful causes, but maybe struggle in some key areas, and you come alongside with your team and you make available some amazing things. So welcome to the podcast. Why don't you take a few moments, Derric, and share a little bit about your past and what you do?
Well, thanks, Randy. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And I just wanted to send greetings to everybody in the audience. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Derric Bakker, you said. I'm the president and the CEO now, actually. I just promoted somebody in the firm to president, so I have to make sure I don't take his fire away, but I'm the CEO and founder of Dickerson Bakker, and we're a firm that really helps. We're dedicated on helping nonprofit organizations grow and thrive, and so that's really what we're about. I've been in the fundraising business and the nonprofit business my whole career. It started right out of college, basically a couple of years out of college, and kind of fell into it as most people do, and it was just a good fit for me. And over the course of my career, I've kind of had 3 chapters of my career. The first chapter was as a practitioner, as a fundraising practitioner, kind of working my way up to, from being in the field to leading a team, and then segued into consulting for another about decade, and then started my own firm in 2010. So the last 15 years or so, I've had the privilege to lead and grow and Dickerson Bakker. And so that's been exciting. So, and most recently, I've just, as I alluded to, kind of did some reorganization of the firm so that I promoted Andrew Olson from our firm to be president of the firm and handled more of the day-to-day, so I could do things like write books, and so focus more outwardly and that. And so that's been a fun transition too.
Excellent. Well, obviously that wealth of experience gives you credibility in writing, which is a huge thing. And then that disperses your expertise into so many other nonprofit worlds. So thank you for doing that. Well, here's my first question as we dive into the dialogue today. And you've said that many nonprofits were built for a different era, which is sort of an interesting statement to make. But what do you think is the single biggest mistake you see nonprofit leaders making today that was maybe reasonable 20 years ago, but now is actually killing fundraising results? What would you say that would be?
It's hard to boil it down to one thing. If I had to boil it down to one thing, it's a mindset. It's a way of thinking. In the book, I kind of take some time at the start of the book to kind of lay out kind of the how did we get here case. How did fundraising become a scenario where it's dominated by mass market, by transactions and everything else? And there's a good case for that. We are basically inheriting, I like to say, we step into worlds already in motion. So as nonprofit leaders, we're inheriting things from the past. This has been decades in history in the making. And the systems that we inherit today were designed for a different era. They were designed for an era when people had higher sense of loyalty, when transactional fundraising, it's interesting if you kind of map out kind of how fundraising has gone over the years. It started very relational. And then over time, it really kind of broke into 2 tracks where you had the major gift side, which was relational, but then everything else became very transactional. It really began to borrow principles and techniques from consumer marketing. And so it was kind of felt like, hey, if it can sell soap, it can sell causes. And so Then we had the transition into television, right? If you remember, you and I are of an era where we were the muscular dystrophy telethon on Labor Day, and the big telethons that they would do, and then digital came. And so what has basically happened is we are now at a point where fundraising is more transactional and more disconnected from donors. It's more about managing donors than relating to donors at a time when the whole paradigm has shifted, where we've moved into a scenario where the major giving is becoming the most significant part of giving in terms of total philanthropy, as for a number of different reasons, middle income households are giving less. And then you also have the younger generations that are much more relational oriented, much more engagement oriented. And our system has evolved into something that just doesn't work well anymore with the new reality of where we are. But we inherited it and not everybody notices it. And so it really is, to answer your question, it's really about stopping and resetting and thinking about the operating system that we have. It's not about improving tactics. It's not about, hey, we need to do more appeals, or we need to be more creative, or we need to do more things. It's about, we need to stop and think, are our models still relevant to donors today? And my answer to that is not very much anymore. And so we need to shift back to different models.
So well put. And we're going to jump in a little later in the dialogue to the whole issue of major donors and understanding that mindset, as you've already alluded to. So here's a second question. It's around donor retention. And probably we could say it's at a crisis level across sectors. If you get a gift from a donor, I think it's about 75% of those donors do not give a second gift. And so talk about a major problem that's taking place. So what do you think is the one thing most organizations are doing in the name of what they would say is donor relations, but it's actually pushing donors away and they don't even realize it?
I would boil it down to essentially this, which is, we're not earning their next gift. We are kind of taking for granted that we have been spoiled in the industry by several generations who valued loyalty and trust and were habitual givers and kind of had their causes. And we've kind of settled into this kind of paradigm, this mindset that if somebody gives us one gift, they're ours, right?
Yeah.
And we're entitled to more. And I share a lot of stories in the book of how we have kind of let our donors down. And one of the core pieces of the book is the talks about what I call the seven core behaviors, the seven behaviors of effective fundraisers. And we can kind of chart how we're dropping the ball as an industry, unfortunately, on many of these, and that's self-reported. We've done surveys of fundraisers and fundraising executives and nonprofit executives on many of these issues, and all of them will say we need to do a better job in all of these things. But fundamentally, it boils down to really earning that next gift.
So important to say that. Could you just expand on that? And if you were consulting, as you have, nonprofits, and they're in that mindset that is more transactional, as you described, and they were saying, what do we do, Derric, to earn those second gifts? Some practical things that you would say, well, here's some things that you could do.
Yeah. So we kind of talk about a number of different paradigm shifts, and the behaviors kind of boil down to, number one, the paradigm is from broadcasting messages to donors to two-way dialogue. Really boils down to listening. And one of the great things that we have today, and we'll talk a little bit about this a little later in the episode, but a lot of what we have today is some technology to it that allows us to extend behaviors that used to be kind of reserved for a small core of donors that were in your major gift department, but we couldn't possibly extend those across the whole donor file. But now through AI and technology, we're able to really extend these behaviors across your entire donor file. So one of them is listening, right? We don't do a good job of listening to donors. We do a good job of broadcasting out to them. And listening, by the way, is much more than just hearing. It's much more than hearing what someone says when they talk. It really means paying attention and learning what donors care about before you try to persuade them to care about what you need. And so we tend to just broadcast out appeals and messages without really paying attention to, what does the donor care about? What are they passionate about? What can we learn about them through right? Through different listening avenues, different ways that you can pick up on their patterns now using technology, et cetera. You don't have to sit down and have coffee with everybody to do that anymore. You can
Sure.
really learn about your donors so that you can really begin to send them messaging about things that they care about and
Mhm.
invite them to support those things on that scale. That's one. I would point out another that is really critically important, that it's expressing genuine gratitude. We typically, as fundraisers, treat gratitude almost as a footnote, and it should be the foundation, because gratitude's it is one of the most powerful and probably most underutilized tools in fundraising. And I'm sure everybody on the line is going to say, "Oh, we send thank you letters all the time."
Sure.
Yeah, but the word is not thank you letters; it's genuine gratitude, right?
Yeah.
And I ultimately, Randy, when you ask about how do we cure the disease of attrition, right? And gain more retention. Gratitude is the foundation of that. Because when donors feel genuinely valued, they give again. When they get a perfunctory acknowledgement, they drift away. I have a story in my book I want to share real quick. It's
Sure.
about a couple that I interviewed in a feasibility study some years ago. And they had given previously to this same organization, to the prior capital campaign, they had given a gift of about $25,000, which,
Okay.
right, when you're doing a $10 million capital campaign, that's not a lot, right? So
Yeah.
you can certainly understand that it didn't really hit the radar. And so what did they get? They got a very perfunctory thank you letter. No recognition of how much they really discussed and talked about. We really want to do something. We're going to stretch. We're going to make the biggest gift we've ever made in our lives, right? The biggest commitment we've ever made in our lives. And we're going to really, right, stretch to give to this cause and organization because we believe in it.
Yeah.
But the organization gets it and it's crickets, right? Crickets. They were hurt by that. They were hurt by that, right? And then now I'm sitting talking to them in a feasibility study about, well, we got another capital campaign coming up. You gave 25,000 of the last one. And that's when this begins to come out. And
Yeah.
so a perfunctory thank you letter a week after the gift comes in is not expressing genuine gratitude. And so I would say those two things are key: listening to donors, paying
Mhm.
attention to what they care about, and actually acting on that, but then also genuine gratitude. Those two in particular, I think, can help turn the dial on attrition and retention.
So good. Couple quick comments on the first on the listening. I think people who are effective at building relationships, as they listen, they know how to ask great questions. They're not talking a lot. They just say, "Hey, John, you made this statement. I just want to follow up with," and then a brief question, and then listen again. Because
Right.
when you do that, as you already said, you're giving that donor the invitation to uncover what's important to him or to her or to them. So I love
Yeah.
that. And then quickly on the thank you. Yeah. What about if that president or that chief financial officer wrote a handwritten thank you note to
That's
that
exactly
donor?
right.
Of course, a phone call would have been better. I understand that.
Yep.
But at least a handwritten note. How long does that take? I worked with the president one time and he said the first and the last thing we do in development is to say thank you. And so you are right on. I appreciate it's so undercovered the thought of gratitude.
Yep. And here's something that again, this is a true story.
Yeah.
You can do, again, you think about, well, how many handwritten notes can a CEO write or in any given day? And the reality is the technology exists today that he
Yes.
can he can do thousands.
For sure.
He can
Yeah.
do thousands, especially if they're batching them. But there's services out there where you can transcribe some key notes on a donor very quickly. Just jot down bullet points or whatever. Here's what I want to say, and a system will actually generate a handwritten note in right. Even can have in they can create a font in your own handwriting and get
Yeah.
that out to the donor. And it
Sure.
is right. It's genuine gratitude, but it's genuine gratitude at scale. And so building those things in, that's why I say, yes, it used to be in the old days, you could only do that with a small percentage of major donors, but the technology really enables you to begin to extend those kind of behaviors at scale, which is really the basis of my entire book.
So good. Love it. Well, in your book, you argue that we should treat every donor like a major donor. We've had a little bit of conversation on the major donor already, but you've got nonprofit presidents that say simply don't have the staff for that. So, what would you say to a leader who believes that kind of personalization is only realistic for that top small tier of what we would call major donors?
Yeah, and that's a fair question. If you hear when I say treat every donor like a major donor, if you hear that as basically give the exact same experience to every donor, that
Yeah.
the idea of we're going to set up thousands of tens of thousands of personal meetings, coffee meetings, yes, that is absurd. You couldn't do it, right? We live in the real world, et cetera. What I'm saying is take the core principles, right? The core principles, the values of major giving. And again, the heart of the book are those 7 behaviors that kind of spell those out. And
Okay.
then begin to extend those in ways like we just talked about, right? Handwritten thank you notes. There are ways that, one of those 7 behaviors is listen first. So that's what's the listening. But that doesn't necessarily mean sit down and talk to each one of your donors. There's surveys you can do. There's
Yeah.
services that you can do to poll your donors, but there's also, you can track interactions. You can see what they click on. You can track what their
Mhm.
interests are.
Okay.
There's so many different ways you can use technology today that you can begin to pay attention to what are donors interested in. An example for even on surveys, again, some of your listeners may be saying, hey, well, we already survey donors. That's not right. That's not a radical idea. But here's the thing. What do you do with that survey information? The first things first, most organizations, when they survey donors, they only really pay attention to the aggregate. So it's like, well, 60% of our donors like this program.
Sure.
Therefore, the next time we send out a one size fits all thing, it's going to be about this program because 60% of them do. But what
Yeah.
about every single survey response? You can actually, if you connect that into your CRM, it's not about 60% like this. So let's just fire that off. It's about everybody that answered that survey. You can see exactly which item they clicked, right?
Mm.
So if you give them 4 options, it's not about which one of these options did all 400 people click. It's which option did each of those 400 people click. And the technology exists to feed that into the CRM, and it's a data point to understand what they care about. And then
Sure.
you can begin through variable text and everything else in your communication, right? Variable copy, to begin to focus in on those things. And that, the impact of that is really significant. That's just one example about how to take that at scale. And so it's really about using AI and today's emerging technologies to take the principles that have always worked best, right? Which are relationship-based fundraising, which have always traditionally been reserved for the major gift department, right? Which is maybe handles 1 or 2% of the donor base, but now to begin extending those en masse at scale across the whole donor base, tactically in very different ways, right? So tactically in very different ways,
Mm.
your top major donors are still going to get the same experience, right? We're not saying change that experience. Your
Sure.
mid-level is going to get a different experience that's going to emphasize more in person, but still not the full experience that the majors are. But the mainstream donors are going to get those same behaviors, those same values, those same principles, kind of woven into your treatment of them in ways that feels more meaningful and more direct for them, more personalized, more individualized, using tech, but doing that efficiently through the use of technology.
Well, that's a critical point, and I think maybe some people look at it this way: AI is the depersonalization. It's machines. It's what is there in being personal. But you highlighted a point. We're leveraging all that information that can be brought back in, and then personalizing it to that individual. So what would have taken 8 or 10 hours of research and trying to find information. Now it's in a matter of minutes. Then, as you said, we take that data and personalize it. So I love that. That's going to be a really key aspect for all of us.
May I add to that, Randy, as well? Because I think you're on to a very, very key point there. Because one of the things that I write about is this is kind of a turning point. How we use AI. It's not a given that we use AI in the manner in which I'm advocating in this book. The manner in which I'm advocating using AI in this book is to amplify the human connection, right? To
Yeah.
to take over many of these different tasks, and also to help us reclaim time that we can put into relational engagement, et cetera. There's
Sure.
another path, right? There's another path. There's a different way AI can be used. And my fear is this is the path that the industry will go. And it will basically be to further disconnect the human connection. And
Yes.
because AI can do everything, right?
Yeah.
AI can take over almost anything except for the relationship, right? But
Mhm.
essentially, they can fake the relationship. But I liken it to a friend of mine, Steve Stapleton, who's kind of a technology expert, likens it to a manufactured diamond. When you first see the diamond, you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference if this is a manufactured diamond or if this is a real diamond, but it's not the same thing. And over time, you can start to figure it out, and donors will figure that out. So
Yeah.
we can go this direction and begin to rebuild that human connection, the very thing that, right, that has been the basis of sustainable generosity since the beginning of fundraising. Or we can go this direction and completely erode the human connection and
Yeah.
accelerate the very challenges that we've been trying to run away from all these last years.
Yeah. This may be a crude way of doing this, but when we look at a president or a major donor fundraising person or an annual giving individual, doesn't really matter. And we think of the relationship with the donor. There are some commonalities. I don't stretch this too far. When you dated who was going to be your spouse in the
For
future,
sure.
you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
you asked great questions. You paid attention to what he or she liked. You enjoyed being with them. All those things are pretty basic just to the fundraising world. It's almost like Vince Lombardi saying to the Green Bay Packers after they'd won the Super Bowl at the base camp the next year, and he says, "Gentlemen, this is a
It's a
football."
football.
You know, it's
Back to the fundamentals.
back to the fundamentals,
Yeah.
exactly. And so technology helps us achieve that, and so it's so well put. Well, here's another question. You spent over 30 plus years working inside and alongside nonprofits. You were in the trenches yourself. What do you know about today's donors, what they actually want that most fundraising teams are still getting wrong because they're listening to what donors say rather than watching what they do?
So, first of all, I want to be careful to generalize all donors because if there's one thing I have learned in 30 years, that donors are very different, right? I mean, we have a tendency to want to generalize, and it's very hard to generalize. But I would say that there are a few things that all donors want, and I think they want trust, right? They want trust that if I'm going to give my money to you, right, you're going to use it wisely, right?
Sure.
That this is not fraud, that this is not, and unfortunately, there's been a lot of betrayal of that trust over the years, and so donors have become much more skeptical, and that kind of piles up because trust once broken is very hard to repair. And it's not even so much your organization may have done a good job of building trust, but within the industry, the more broken trust there is, the more it leads to skepticism and
Sure.
doubt. And so I would say they want that trust. They want to know that when they give a gift, it's being used in the way that they intended. And that's linked to
Okay.
trust, but it's very specific. And that's where impact reporting comes into play to share. Too often we report activities. We don't report outcomes. We don't tell the story. We don't draw that line between the, the investment that a donor makes and the impact, how that makes somebody's life better. And we need to do a better job of that. And I think the other thing that they want is they want connection.
Mhm.
One of the things I talk in the book about, one of those core behaviors is inviting relationship. And you were right to say it's in a lot of ways, it's like a dating relationship, right? Dating to courtship,
Right.
relationship in the context of fundraising, it's not just one to one, right? It's like you're marrying into an Italian family. You're marrying the whole family. so
Well,
so you got to meet mom and
grandmas and
dad. You got
grandpas too.
right. And I have a good friend who's Italian, so I actually stole that joke from him.
Okay.
So he married into an Italian family, and so a Sicilian family, by the way. But that's kind of the analogy I would use with a relationship with an organization. You're
Mm.
not just dating one individual. You've got to build interconnection and multidimensional relationship with folks. And so inviting them into that relationship in a meaningful way that they feel part of something like, common cause community. And this is critically important for younger generations.
Okay.
Younger generations, Randy, have flipped the script, right? Where it used to be that somebody would, baby boomers, and you can track this through generations, but let's just look at baby boomers versus the Gen X millennials as a compare and contrast. And this is probably what I'm going to say is even more so for greatest generation, the World War II generation, et cetera. But generally, those older generations, they give first, they get involved later. Okay?
Okay. Yeah.
The younger generation wants to get involved first. Involvement and engagement is a pathway to giving. And we
Uh,
have again set the paradigm that once you give, we start getting you engaged. Well, if you are hung up on that and you are not using engagement as a pathway to giving and growing giving, you're going to be invisible to those younger donors, and your donors are going to age out because
yeah.
they're not even going to find you, because you can send all the mail you can want and email and social media, but you
Sure.
will not likely acquire millennial donors at scale if you are
No.
not giving them a pathway to involvement before they're giving at a major level.
I love that, and I heard it said one time, rather than asking for a gift, ask for advice.
Right.
And I know we need to be particular about who we do that with. I understand all those dynamics. But talk a little bit about this matter of ownership. Now, we don't want the donor to direct the ship. I understand that and
Right.
take of course. That's
Right.
basic. However, having said that, this issue of involvement, I heard it said one time that we're looking for a way that donors could help in negotiating on the program or the gift or their involvement. Talk a little bit, what does that look like so we don't steer into some shallow waters that we don't want to get into, but we honor the fact of what does involvement mean?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right in your comment. I like to say, if you want someone's opinion, ask them for money. But if you want money, it's best to get their opinion, their buy-in, and their opinion first. I agree with you. This cannot be the tail that wags the dog, right? We're not leading and managing organizations by survey, right?
Sure.
Or poll. We still have to, leaders of the organization are charged with, right, being responsible and governing the organization, and as in selecting the staff who lead. But if you're not listening to your donors, and that gets back to the listening first thing, getting their advice. If you're not listening to their donors, they'll walk with their feet. Because if they don't feel like, right, and particularly major donors and younger donors again, right, if they don't feel like their voice is heard or they're being listened to or they're being respected, and a lot of it is simple dignity. And again,
Sure.
there's ways to do that. If they're a mega donor or major donor, yeah, the CEO might actually sit down for coffee with them, or,
For
and
sure.
go engage eye to eye. But surveying donors, preference centers, different ways to get, doing interviews, doing conference calls, right?
Yeah.
Doing call-in calls, kind of almost like investor calls, right? So,
Sure.
right,
Mm.
that, state of the organization calls with the CEO that, invite people to those calls where there's a chat session, and right.
Yeah.
When you send out the annual report, you can invite, every year we broadcast out our annual report. Look at all the great stuff we did, right? Why not send out that annual report with an invitation to come to a, right, to a roundtable session? We want to hear back from you and do
Sure.
some online polls during the conference call, et cetera.
Wonderful.
We'd love to get your input on these things as we're looking forward on this. Here's some of the issues we grappled with, and then just invite people to those conference calls. And actually, that's actually helpful information that management can use, that leaders can use in making decisions. And donors will feel like, wow, they care, right?
Yeah.
They care what I think.
Sure. It's a dialogue. It's a two-way street. You've been saying that already, and that is so true. Well, I've got a few questions at the end. I call them my fast five. They don't have to do necessarily with your 30 plus years in the professional role, but more just who you are. And here's the first question. What would you say is the best piece or a great piece of professional advice you've received?
Well, given our whole conversation today, it probably will not surprise you, but
Okay.
it came from Jerry Panis, and I had the privilege
Oh,
early in my career to be under his tutelage and to, right, learn from him. And I was connected to him when I first started in fundraising. And that piece of advice is listening is a fundraiser's most important skill, and that has really stuck with me from the very beginning.
it's so great. What a hero he was. Glad you had that opportunity to
Yeah.
interact. What's a daily habit you cannot live without?
It really is carving out an hour or two or so every morning, in the morning,
Yeah.
for a cup of coffee, for some personal reflection, to kind of get my day in order, to go through my inbox. But one of the things that I feel is really critical is to start every day kind of with opportunity to think, right? To think and to, we're always so busy and so go, go, go. You
Yes.
know, I have a block on my calendar every morning.
Okay.
Do not schedule. This is time for me to have a cup of coffee, to kind of go, right, and a little time to make sure I'm right. Last week we lost Lou Holtz. I don't know if you're a football fan or not, Randy. I mean,
I saw that. I'm a
all
Minnesotan, so, yes.
but one of my favorite things, and I posted about this on LinkedIn, was his acronym for WIN. Right? What's important now? Right? What's important now? And that was something that he talked to his team all about. And it was like, it's not about next season. It's not about playoffs. It's today. What's important now? And if you're not taking a little time every morning just to get your head around what's most important today. So that's a habit that I've incorporated into my daily routine that I would loath to break.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, here's the next question. I want you to imagine you're back to your 20-year-old self, but knowing what you know now, what would be some advice you give to that energetic, inspiring young man?
Well, the first thing I would say is, have patience, and right,
Mhm.
don't try to plan your life.
Right.
It's something I tell my kids too all the time as I look back kind of over my career and my life. Often will say, be mindful of what doors are opening and what doors are closing. Don't be so honed in on the map that you've got a plan and
Yeah.
somewhere to go. And most certainly, if doors are opening and closing, don't try to climb in through windows, right? It's like,
Oh,
it's interesting how opportunities kind of come. And I never planned to be a fundraiser. I never planned to be a consultant. Right. It was kind of, it's kind of following the path and being open to the opportunities and developing, right, those, awareness and keeping your radar up. And so don't try to plan your whole life in your whole career, I would say, because it never works out the way you plan it anyways. So
yeah, there are bends in our road. I know I've had some.
absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And just to be flexible and open, to explore.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Good. Love it. Well, the next question, we're going to go a little deeper here. I want you to think of a personal failure. I'm not talking about epic, but something that you would say, hmm, but you know what? Through that, it actually set you up for success. Share a little bit about.
Yeah. Well, I would say mine was kind of epic, actually.
Okay. All right.
Back in, I guess it was probably 20 years ago now, I was involved in a business that, went bankrupt almost. That
Good.
it really, and it was
Mm.
one of these situations where it was going great until it wasn't. And then
Yes.
a number of things happened and we got overextended, we got overambitious. It really was a learning experience. I did my MBA, and I like to say I learned more about business and being a business owner and founding a business from that experience, from that failure, right,
Yeah.
than I
Sure.
did from my whole MBA. And so,
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
you can really learn from those experiences. But it was pretty epic. I mean, it was really hard at the time. When you're in the thick of that, it's not a fun moment, and you don't know where's this going to go. And it wiped us out financially for a while. But my wife was gracious enough when I said I want to try going into business again that she didn't hit me with a frying pan. But this time it was successful.
Good. All right. Well, yeah, those lessons are life directing, life giving when we accept them for what we can learn. Well,
Yeah.
here's the last question. Where's your favorite place to go to disconnect and recharge?
Well, honestly, we have a timeshare down in Cancun that is kind of
Yeah.
my wife's getaway place, and so we get down there, and it's a beautiful beach and a beautiful resort, and it's just we kind
Good.
of unplug. It's not a vacation, it's a getaway. And we kind of
Oh, yeah.
distinguish between the two because vacations get busy, right? And we do a big family vacation every year with our kids and we
Yeah.
take them somewhere, vacation planner, and it's like
Oh,
got
sure.
everything planned and mapped out.
Right.
But our
Yep.
getaway place, our happy place is it's a place called the Westin Laguna Mar in Cancun, and we try to get down there once every winter.
Excellent. It's wonderful to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Well, Derek, what a delight it has been to interact with you. You've opened yourself to us in a wide variety of ways, rich, rich discussion. So very grateful for that. So thank you. Also would like to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about how people can connect with you, talk more about your book, but also the consulting service you have.
Absolutely. So the book is called A Better Way to Fundraise, and the subtitle is Treat Every Donor Like a Major Donor. And
All
there's another
right.
subtitle under that about how AI is enabling major giving at scale and reshaping the future of philanthropy. So it is available by pre-order right now on
Okay.
Amazon. So the short title, A Better Way to Fundraise. Like I said, it's a Kindle only on pre-order, and the book itself will be released at the end of April. So April 27 is the official release date, and we're going to be doing a launch party at the CLA Outcomes Conference in Dallas. So any of our listeners that want to join us, they're welcome to join us at that party at 4:30. It's a reception party. Our firm, Dickerson Bakker, is my name is Bakker, so it's dickersonbaker.com with two Ks. And the main things that we work on with organizations, we kind of cover a lot of ground, but the main things we work on with organizations is fundraising in a lot of different manners. So we do direct response fundraising, which is, a big part of what we do. It's probably half of what we do. We do capital campaign fundraising. That's about third to a quarter of what we do. A lot of grants, but then there's a lot of other things kind of in the consultative realm,
Mm.
strategy and other things. And we do some executive search,
Okay.
headhunting for fundraising positions in particular, helping organizations find fundraisers. A
Okay.
broad kind of depth of and breadth of services that we provide. We're privileged to have grown quite a bit. So we have about 57, I think we're up to 57 full-time employees, and we work all
Oh,
over the country. And so
sure.
our website is dickersonbaker.com with two Ks. And anyone wants to reach me, it would be, they can send it to info@dickersonbaker.com, and that would come my way.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you for how you've served our nonprofit industry. A blessing to have people like you who talk about relationships, talk about gratitude, talk about let's find where people really are at today and serve them in ways that are meaningful to them because they want to ensure their gifts have lasting legacies. Wonderful. Thank you. And my name again is Dr. Randy Dirks. This is Funding the Future Now podcast. And you're welcome to take these in. We put them out regularly a couple times a week. And so we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.
Bye bye.